Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today we're going to discuss a little bit of a tip or piece of information around the subject of where is the best place to form a company. This is probably one of the most common questions that I get as people are interested in knowing where should I set up. And we've talked in many different situations about many different factors. The truth is, as I've always said, there's no there's no one size fits all. You have to look at what are the circumstances specific to you and what are your objectives in order to figure out what works, and that's also evolving over time. But today I'm going to talk about one factor that I've been having some discussions with people about, and we're going to talk about it, and that is jurisdiction reputation and how much this should play into where it is that you're forming a company. So we're going to talk about that, various different factors depending on the type of business you're in, type of customers you have, etc. So let's dive in. Before we do that, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit that little all notifications thing. Really appreciate your support on the channel. Subscribing, it really helps us out a lot. Check out some of our other videos, and if you'd like help with these subjects of where to form companies and open bank accounts and how to do it and help doing it, maybe relocating, getting a residency or a second citizenship, etc., please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net or offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so reputation. This is a topic that I feel as though certain people tend to, well, let's just break it down kind of in terms of like a logical framework. So the first question is always reputation with whom, okay? So this could be with your customers, this could be with employees, this could be with investors, this could be with banks, maybe partners as well. Anyway, whoever in there. Courts, I guess, could be another one that you might consider. So any of those six, maybe there's a couple other little ones that are relevant. However, for our purposes, let's just kind of go through them. So does reputation, the jurisdiction that you're dealing with, matter for the perspective of banking? Yes, absolutely. Like, banks basically have a list of high-risk jurisdictions, and depending on the bank, sometimes they have different ways of rating them, etc. But the reputation actually really does matter. Okay, so in other words, they're going to put more scrutiny into transactions coming from certain places. They're going to put more scrutiny into businesses coming from different places, etc. So in those cases, reputation does matter. And that's why one of the things that we typically start with when we're building an international structure is we think about the banking component of it. Next one is talking about clients. Now, generally speaking, in my view, a lot of people overemphasize how much this matters. I have quite a lot of experience dealing with quite a lot of companies, dealing with quite a lot of customers around the world, and it is very rare that this matters. So I'll hear this from some people where they say, oh, we're concerned about, the reputation, the image that it's going to have with our customers, etc. Most of the time, it doesn't matter. Maybe they're going to smile, maybe they're going to go, oh, why is that? But generally speaking, just think about it yourself. When you're paying for something, most of the time, how much does this matter? Now, sometimes there is a component around, say, online trust, and it can be useful to have, for example, an address in someplace else, right? So for example, you probably don't want to buy from a Nigerian e-commerce site. You kind of figure that has a bad reputation. But you don't usually know the legal entity anyway, right? So you can list an address that might correspond if that's necessary. With services businesses, I find generally it's a trust thing. However, there are a few notable exceptions to this. First of all, sometimes there's companies have specific rules around just kind of the function of who they're willing to deal with and how. So that's the first thing. Second, you can be in a situation where if you're a government contractor, it can matter a lot. Okay, so if you have government contracts, it might completely be different than in any other situation. Okay, so that's the next factor. Aside from that, most of the time, it's not really a thing to worry about. If you actually test it, one of the things I think is really important is for us to challenge our assumptions, right? And I remember kind of going back to, it was my second business. I had an office in the downtown of the city I was in at the time, and I thought, this was an important thing. I needed to have an office, I needed to have business cards, I need to have these, credibility marks, right? And So, that's fine and good, except for the fact that I was busy basically losing a whole bunch of money every month paying for this office that was hardly getting used. And I had an opportunity. The person who was occupying the office next to me wanted to expand, and they called me up. It was around Christmas time. Said, hey, they said there's no space for me elsewhere, but, could I expand into yours, and, maybe you can relocate to another place. And because I wanted to get out of it, because I was losing a bunch of money, I couldn't afford it at the time, I said, yeah, absolutely, go ahead, take it. And I sent them a message that night saying, hey, he's going to take over my lease, and that's going to be that. And for me, it was an exercise of just challenging the assumption. I believed that for credibility purposes, I needed to have that office. And it turned out this was totally false, made no difference in my business. I didn't make less money, etc. I didn't lose clients or anything like that. So in that sense, I just really think it's worth challenging your assumptions. Even if you think that's the case, I'd almost say try forming a company somewhere else just to try sending an invoice to see if it actually makes a difference. You're probably going to find, and it's probably not worth it, right? But challenging your assumptions is super valuable. And generally speaking, a lot of these image-based assumptions don't prove out in that regard. What about other groups? In terms of recruiting, it could matter, but mostly doesn't. Okay, most of the time, you having a relationship with the people, kind of that personal connection, far trumps the other things. In other words, if you're in a situation where somebody's not coming to work for you because of where the company you have is formed, then generally speaking, you have a problem with the rapport that you're building, not with where the company is located. Now, again, there might be some rare exceptions to this where, for instance, they want access to certain benefits or Social Security or something, and if you're not registered locally, that's a little bit different. That's not really a reputational concern. That's, this other piece that goes along with it. Okay, so something worth considering. Courts, sometimes you can be in a situation where courts will find that it appears as though you may have certain motives based on where you've formed a company. However, generally speaking, that shouldn't turn the case. So in other words, it doesn't set up the greatest first impression, but ultimately that's not the basis of the decision. So I've never actually seen a case where that's turned it and been the issue that causes you to get in trouble or lose a case or the other way around. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. The next thing that you might consider is investors, partners, and here I would say, maybe similar to some extent to something you could have happen when it comes to employees. Of course, choice of law matters, right? If I'm an investor, do I want to invest into a country where I have no recourse in the event that there's fraud or something? Not really, right? So that can actually make a big difference. Sometimes reputationally, sometimes in terms of optics, etc. So if you're going to raise a bunch of investment capital, or you have partners who you don't have a sufficiently established relationship with, etc., then that would be something to consider. So anyway, bottom line is, reputation, does it matter? Yeah, it can. That being said, a lot of people don't know much about reputation anyway. People have kind of weird ideas. And for the most part, it's not going to make a difference for the majority of businesses. But in these cases that I've talked about here, it can, and so it is a factor to consider. So I hope that helps. Again, every situation is specific, so you need to check into it as it applies to you. So, if you have questions, put them in the comments below. Happy if you reach out to me and, we can discuss your situation specifically and how I can help you. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you guys on the next video.